Here at Be Freaking Awesome, we believe that life is too short to be anything less than extraordinary. Join us as we explore what it means to live authentically, grow continuously, and have a blast while doing it. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I'm one of your hosts, Sami, here with Angela Belford, and today we have a conversation with Adam Dorsay. This conversation was so good that we actually ended up needing to chop it in half and have two separate ones because it was really rich, meaty, and hopefully has a lot of value for you guys listening today. I got a chance to talk with Adam a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that I was super pumped about was that he actually is a resiliency expert, and he has helped start some really big, cool resiliency-related programs at Facebook, DigitalOcean, all sorts of other things. And his accolades and education is a lengthy list. I'll let you guys go to his website if you want to read through all of those things. But this has been something that he has been involved in for a while, not just in research, but also on the ground, talking to people within his practice as a psychologist and a therapist, and really helping to move the needle. And he talks about how connection just comes up over and over and over again. And so I'm really excited for this conversation to talk about why connection matters, how to go about improving your connections, and all of the things that he had in store.
The one thing, if you're, we talked about his private practice. He also, in his book, he has had 2 TEDx talks. And so he will reference those. One of them, Friendships in Adulthood, which we're going to hear about next week. And the other one is called Emotions, the Data Men Miss. And so it's always entertaining to me whenever we end up talking about death, and it's still a very entertaining conversation. And sometimes when we're just going to do something fun, it actually is pretty intense. So I hope everybody enjoys listening to Conversation with Adam.
Oh my goodness. Adam, I'm so excited for this conversation today. I finished your book, Super Psyched, and honestly, while reading this book, I really felt like this book was the brother to Angela's book, Traveling Light, and that so much of the things that you talk about are things that Angela talks about as well, that really approaches it from different lenses and different perspectives. I think, Angela, you have a lot about, how to unpack your trauma and unpack the things that we've been carrying with us. And Adam, you have a lot about how are we moving forward and how are we connecting with others. Both of you still address past and future. And oh my gosh, it's just so rich. So for anybody listening, if you love Traveling Light, you are going to love Super Psyched. And I'm just so eager for this conversation today. It's going to be really, really great.
Right back at you, Sami and Angela. I'm so happy to be with you. And that's so cool that there's some confluence between your book, Angela, and mine. So that's just amazing to hear that we are finally reunited.
Separated at birth.
Separated at birth.
So I'm going to give like a quick teaser for the book and then kind of set up some of the conversation. So the subtitle is Unleash the Power of the 4 Types of Connection and Live the Life You Love. And the 4 types of connection, a little bit of a spoiler, your connection with yourself, your connection with others, your connection with your community and the world, and your connection with spirituality and like this greater sense of things. Maybe I'm going to start with like a hard question right off the bat. Maybe it's not that hard.
Do it.
One of the things that I hear from people a lot whenever we start talking about living intentionally and living on purpose is that they worry that they're going to lose spontaneity. For example, one of my friends who I used to work with, she really wanted her husband to get her a big anniversary gift. She refused to tell him that she wanted a big anniversary gift because she said, if I tell him what I want, that diminishes the value of it.
Right.
And I was like, but if you don't tell him and then he doesn't get you what you want, you will be more disappointed than if you had told him and he got you what you want. And she was like, if getting me the gift is worth 100 points without me telling him, it's only worth like 60 points for me to tell him and get the gift. And I was like, or you get 0 points for getting nothing. I think about this story a lot, and I think about it when we start thinking about doing connection on purpose And that sometimes people say we're going to lose the spontaneity of connection. Isn't it supposed to be that I just felt the vibe and we just connected, and it's like it was when I was a kid and we just asked, can we be friends? And now we are in each other's weddings and all of these things. What do you have to say to somebody who maybe doesn't want connection to feel so prescribed?
First of all, I totally get it. It seems like it would be so great if we had somebody in our lives who intuitively knew exactly what we wanted and delivered it without us asking. That would feel like love at the highest level. One small problem with us terrestrial beings, no matter how well we know each other, are right about 40% of the time, even if we know each other really, really, really well. Of course, if we don't, it goes down beneath that. I forget the exact percentage, but it's somewhere in hovering around 40%, even amongst people who know each other well. So it's a big risk. This person is saying, I would rather get 0 than get 60 in some ways by not asking for what they want. And I would really encourage people to ask for what you want. And you may actually be surprised that when you get that thing that you want, after having asked for what you wanted, it still may feel amazing. It may feel close to 100. For a particular birthday, I asked my wife very specifically, I'm not a particularly materialistic guy, for a particular watch, which I'm wearing now. I wear it every day. I used to be, a watch guy with a lot of watches. I am now a guy with one single watch. Not a super, super expensive watch, but it's a watch that I absolutely love. And I asked for it and she delivered. And every day I look at that watch and I think about, wow, my wife gave this to me and I love it. So I would ask that person, I think you nailed it, Sami, is it so diminished that you'd be willing to go down to 0 not to ask for it? And I would love to do a simulation with this person and find out, in 3 worlds, getting it, is it really 100? Asking for it, is it really just a 60? And what does it feel like to not get it at all? And to really, really be able to look at all 3 responses. Of course, this is a simulation. It wouldn't happen in real life.
Sure.
But as it relates to my book, at the very nucleus of our connection points is our connection to self. And that informs all of the other connections that we have, whether it's to others, the world, or something greater. While the 4th realm is kind of spiritual, I call it something greater because even, certainly some people go to church on Sundays. Those people may find religion and spirituality in that way. Some people who subscribe to other spiritual ideas might go to the spiritual, and some Orthodox atheists might take issue with it. But I would also say that even the most Orthodox atheist may experience awe. They go to Stonehenge, they go to the Grand Canyon, they go to Yellowstone, and they see the grandeur, the beauty. Maybe they see stars at night. And I would imagine that Carl Sagan, the great astrophysicist, was probably a hardcore atheist. And yet he felt small amidst the grandeur of the stars. And he probably had something akin to, wow, there's something greater going on here. Even if it's just the Big Bang, I am small. And that's what I'm looking at, because we have actually studied the science of awe, AWE. When we experience awe, like let's say there's a solar eclipse out in Oregon, as there was in 2017, strangers will start hugging each other. What is going on here? They haven't taken psilocybin. And yet, if you look at their brain structures at that moment, it's as if they've taken the psychoactive chemical in magic mushrooms. They stop being super self-conscious. You may remember that double rainbow dude back in the day in early YouTube. He's like, oh my gosh, it's a double rainbow. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And people would laugh about it. Even South Park, completely clowned on him. I dig the double rainbow guy because he was experiencing awe and he was willing to just experience joy without fear of other people judging him. And that is kind of the 4th realm. So that's what I was looking at. After 20,000 hours of being a therapist, the word connection just keeps coming up. After being a podcast host and nearly 250 podcast episodes, talking to thought leaders all over the globe, the word connection keeps coming up. Reading tons of books, the word connection keeps coming up. And if you look at the opposite, and I'm just going to stop here, if you look at the DSM, which is the Bible that we use to diagnose with mental health practitioners, virtually every condition, depression, anxiety, trauma, etc., psychosis, all of them have elements of disconnection. Depression is we're disconnecting with the present because we are thinking about the past. oftentimes. If we're anxious, oftentimes we're future tripping. Oftentimes when we experience trauma, a key feature of trauma is dissociation. We're not really connecting with ourselves at all. And psychosis is a break from reality in and of itself. So if disconnection is at the heart of everything we don't want, it seems logical that connection is at the heart of everything we do.
Yeah.
There is so much to unpack with that. It's fabulous. I'm going to start with awe because we are on the Be Freaking Awesome
Yes.
podcast. So thank you for sliding that in and being all branded on your fourth element there. And there is something that when I think about one of the exercises I take people through, and even just in talking to friends, is like, well, what do you want? And that seems to be this really hard question for people to answer. Like, it's really hard. And so what I do is say, okay, well, great. What do you don't want? Now let's look at the opposite of that. And I get real nervous when I get really cynical. When I just am like looking at it like, oh, it's just always going to be, ugh. And the antidote, I think, to cynicism and the opposite of what I would want if I am kind of in a cynical spiral. When you're in marketing, when you raise kids, it's really easy to be cynical. When you go through my childhood, it's really easy to be cynical. Anyway, and so when I'm in that spiral, the idea of, cultivating a sense of awe and a sense of wonder is really refreshing to me and also feels accessible, right? If I am thinking about the idea of when I'm struggling in anxiety or depression, can you cultivate awe and the connection to that, something greater? I love that. It feels not such this big thing to solve, right? Sometimes knowing myself, terrifying, right? Letting others know me could be terrifying. Yes. I really love the idea of actually starting at the end of cultivating that awe and wonder. I was having a conversation recently and this person had said, I didn't learn anything. That was so boring. And I knew all the stuff. And I was like, that's interesting. That seems like a very closed approach to life. And I literally had similar opportunities to learn. And I probably have more training and more education than the person teaching. And yet I kept looking for what's the one thing? What's the one thing? I just need to learn one thing and this 30-minute session was worthwhile for me. And they were just like, and it was this, they were blown away. For those that aren't watching YouTube, I always tell people you should watch the YouTube because I'm constantly making faces. But that idea of like, there's an openness to it that I love. I love that so much.
When you talk about the accessibility of it, Angela, it takes me back to a Bluey episode, as things do. It was called Born Yesterday, where they play a game where their dad pretends that he was born yesterday. And so the kids have to explain everything, like how everything works. And the funny moment at the end of the episode is that the kids are talking to their mom. And she's like, did you guys tell your dad he can stop playing the game because you've moved on? And they're like, yeah, we told him a while ago. And it cuts to their dad sitting in the like backyard, like looking at a leaf. And it like zooms in on all of the wonder of all the things. And he's just sitting there like, whoa. Like, and I took a moment to think about if I was born yesterday, like soaked in awe at a leaf. And anyway, it makes you tear up. It's a great episode. You should go watch it. Not that I just spoiled it all for you, but still, you can do it anywhere and with anything.
Yeah.
Totally true. Sami and Angela, I'm blown away by a lot of things you said. I'll go with Sami because you're recent. My colleague, Dr. Michael Amster, who wrote a book on awe, said awe can be microdosed all day. You can look at pancakes. The batter, as it becomes a solid, is kind of amazing. If you look at, and I know fire has been a really rough word these days, but if you look into a pizza oven and see the fire and just it's awesome knowing that this can do something wonderful and it can do something awful. AWFUL, awful, also comes from the same etymological root as awesome. Angela, you said so many great things, one of which is people don't know what they want. I work with highly educated, incredibly successful, mostly males, and the answer to the question, what do you want, blows their mind. They know what they want for their org, they know what they want for their family, they know what they need for their house. But when I ask them, what do you want for you? It's like, I have no idea. They've done all the things that they were told to do by their parents, society, etc. And yet, when you ask them, what do you want? They become tongue-tied. It's almost like, I remember when my son was 3 years old and he could speak, but he didn't know. He'd say, want something. He wanted something, but he couldn't say what he wanted. And it's as if these Ivy League educated men who are amazing are rendered to be like 3 years old. They want something, but they don't know what it is. And so they shoot, blank bullets at the things that they think that they want. They get the expensive thingy, or I'll be happy when I achieve this, which you and I, both of you and I, know that's a treadmill. And then you talked about the idea of sharing yourself with another. I mean, some people have said that being in therapy is like going to Yoda's cave in The Empire Strikes Back. It's terrifying. You see your shadow stuff. And some people say, I'd much rather take off my clothes in front of a medical doctor than talk about myself in front of a mental health practitioner and get to know my shadow material. And therapy is really, it's a place for the courageous. And if you borrow from Brene Brown and recognize that a precursor to courage is fear. If you do something like a seasoned parachuter who jumps out of a plane every day, somebody could say, wow, he's fearless and he's got, how courageous. And it's like, no, that's not courageous, because that's just something that guy does. It's like making soup.
Or my experience with skydiving, that people
terrifying.
have said, Sami, you went skydiving, you must be surely you can do this thing. I'll be honest, skydiving, I didn't actually skydive. I agreed, I signed up, I got in an airplane, and then some other guy attached himself to me and he jumped out of an airplane while I just I don't really think this is a good idea. So I was attached to a person who jumped out of an airplane.
But were you terrified?
I was terrified, but I was not
courage?
Actually the person who did the jumping. And so by that point, yes, I could have said no and I could have backed out, but I didn't actually do the jumping.
I'm still giving you the win. Here's why. The jitters that led up to it, the night before you went to sleep, you're like, am I really doing this? You're driving over there. Am I really doing this? You get on the plane, it takes off. It looks like I'm really doing this. You attach yourself to this dude who jumps out of a plane. It's like, the fear that you had, the cost of entry was courage. And so I just got to salute you, because that was amazing.
It is amazing, and I love it. And I also want to applaud my dad, who had it worse than me, because he was sitting in the back of the plane and he jumped second, and he talks about 7 seconds difference between when I went out and when he went out was like the most real 7 seconds of his life, because he's like, oh crap, she just disappeared and I have to go next. Like, what? He had to actually move himself to the edge of the plane. I got lucky and just fell, and it was great.
I think I want to be the first one to go out too. Oh my God, the waiting.
Yes, because sometimes making that choice, I think, is really hard for us. We had a question that we asked our staff the other day. Would you rather quit your job or would you rather be fired? And apparently, I've now started asking a lot of my friends, my own, biased research of just the people around me. So many people would rather be fired than quit their job, because they didn't have to make the choice. They didn't have to move themselves to jump out of the airplane, and their life was changed, and they have all these things. And sometimes that thing that prompts you to make the change is really, really hard. This reminds me of one of my questions I wanted to ask. I don't normally prep all these questions, but within your book, one of the things you talk about is pretty regularly, a couple of different stories, death and the death of others is a motivator. It's seeing that person who is close to you, who passed away, that you didn't get to reconnect with, that you didn't reach out and have that conversation with. And I don't know, my futile question to the universe, I guess, is there a better motivator for us than just the perspective of death? Or what is it about this end of life time and being with somebody end of life that makes us like, no, I really have to take advantage of these moments?
Yeah,
This is
there's no
maybe a
one
futile
motivator.
question.
Sure. So there's no one motivator for all people. Michael Jordan was
Mhm.
famously motivated by people who he thought were dissing him, and sometimes he'd even make up that they were dissing him so that he'd get motivated. Other people are motivated by other things. But one thing that is for sure is death and taxes are the only certainties in life. And
Mhm.
that memento mori, which is the way the ancient Romans would say it when, the victor would enter Rome, there would be a slave who would say, memento mori, memento mori. Remember that you're human and you're going to die, and
Mm.
it makes life more precious. If you ever read a really great book by Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, one of the things that Paulo has said in an interview is that death is always riding next to him everywhere he goes, and he speaks Portuguese, so he referred to death as a her. She keeps me more awake while I'm alive. I'm paraphrasing poorly, but he said something akin to that. And I just recently interviewed Jodie Wellman on my podcast. She wrote a book called You Only Die Once, and she's all about memento mori. She's all about getting
Ooh.
rid of regrets. It's always later than we think. And
Mhm.
if you think about doing something someday, I remember I was in a I was in a town that was about an hour away from the beach. I was in a homestay program, and I said, I really want to go to the beach. I want to see our beach. And it was in Spain. They said, mañana, mañana. And mañana literally never came, and I got on a plane. I never saw the beach. But many of us do this with our lives. And the fact is, like, if you want to go on a boat during the winter to someplace warm, perhaps as Angela may be doing in the near future, just do that, and make it salient now. A few summers
Mm.
ago, I finally took my kids, interesting slip, to Japan. I used to live there, and I still speak the language, and I hadn't been there with my family. I hadn't been there in God decades, and I realized, wow, my sons are going to be leaving home. I brought my son to college, my older son, and you know that song by Bruno Mars, I should have bought you flowers. I realized I should have bought him more birria tacos. Like, we should have had more tacos together. And I know that sounds
Mm.
silly, but we didn't have it. We had plenty of taco time and plenty of other times together. But if I had to do it again, I would have increased that by 20%. I wished I had more time. I get tearful thinking about, my son being off in college, and the fact that, he lived his first 18 years of life under my roof, and maybe for the rest of our lives together, he might spend another full year in total. But the good news is he's launched. The bad news is, uh, it's a micro death of sorts. And so it really gets us to say, am I going to be on my phone and play, Candy Crush when I'm around my kids, or am I going to be with my kids?
Mm.
I Okay, so I want to start on the death being a motivator because in essence that has been the drive of why I've lived the life the way I have,
Hmm.
because I was 24 when I lived in 4 families growing up. My grandma was my grandma was my grandma. I went from one family to the next, and I was 24 when she died, and she was 72. I can now tell you that she has outlived 5 of her 7 children. She is on track at 72 to outlive all of them. Um,
To
and
have a longer life than her
to have a
children.
longer life. Right. Like the 2 younger ones, it doesn't look good that they will actually make it to 72. And so I have always like kind of had this genetic clock. Like my adopted first mom, she died at 29, and then my biological mom at 43. And so I have this like clock that just says I got no guarantees that I'll make it to my 90th birthday. I talk about 90th birthday parties in my book. And because of that, I I really do start with the end in mind so often. And I'm not trying to be braggy. I'm just trying to say, like, I'm going to celebrate something that I'm really honoring about myself. Is that, do I do it perfect every time? No, 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 I don't. But I did do things like when I'm in the car with a kid, phones off. I didn't talk on the phone when they were in the car, and I had that one-on-one time. And I even still to this day love to be present. And so I will get way behind on email, and I'll get way behind on text message and answering stuff because I'm here where I'm at. And there have been several opportunities where it's really inconvenient. Like another one of my grandmas recently had a 90th birthday, and it was just going to be a pain. And and I was going to have to, and I didn't have a lot. And then I thought, if my grandma, my treasured grandma that helped raise me, if she were here today and if you could drive 6 hours there and back so that you could spend another hour with you, would you? And that is a question I ask myself so often, is like, what would you give to do that one more hour with her? When she neared the end of her life, she was a little bit hypochondriac the last few years of her life. It's adorable. She
Sure. Adorable is definitely how I would describe that.
I don't know. Anyway, that's a whole other different podcast. But anyway, she called me and she said, "Hey, the doctor's giving me 2 weeks to live." And I'm like, oh, here we go again. How many times has she said that? And my friend who's a doctor said, "Angela Belford, get yourself in that car right now and get yourself there."
1,000,000%.
And so my husband couldn't go that weekend, but I loaded up Sami, I was pregnant, so she's 2.5, and I took my little 2.5-year-old, and we wandered down to spend the weekend with my grandma. My aunt got the same call and didn't wander down. And 4 days after I left, I got the call from my uncle that said she was gone. And I just I saw how I felt and how well I slept, knowing I got myself in the car, and I saw the tremendous pain that my aunt went through, still goes through to this day, that she didn't get herself in the car and drive that extra. Now for her, it wasn't 3 hours, it was 8 hours, but still, she's like, no amount of money could keep me from that connection like we're talking about here. And so I don't know. I just needed to, I don't even have I don't know how to land this plane except to just say, death is a motivator, and in a very interesting way, it can be the thing. If I don't feel like it, like when my other grandma had her 90th birthday party and I didn't feel like it, I used that opportunity to be a motivator. So you can use it in a positive way. It doesn't always have to be like, I'm going to show them, or, oh, I have to leave their legacy. It can just be a nice little reminder to you to be the version of yourself you really want to be. And I talk all the time about, I sleep well. I've had several people pass in the last few years, and I just go, one of them passed last year, and she wasn't the most lovely human. And yet the last time I spent time with her, I was very intentional about giving her a lot of attention. I'm like, man, I feel so good about so I always practice my future self, giving my future self the gift of not having the regret.
I love that.
Giving myself the gift of having, I'm going to sleep well. I'm going to invest that time. It's inconvenient. Sometimes it's like I'm tired. I'm late at night because I'm driving back from those crazy trips. I don't want to answer the phone when this person is calling me. And sometimes I don't, but just give yourself a gift of connection.
Yeah, we call that regret inoculation. And it's a very important thing to do. I remember, speaking of landing a plane and grandparents, I mean, my grandpa Ben was one of the most precious human beings that I've ever had. Both of my sons are named after him. And as he was kind of moribund, he was dying. My father flew out, and my dad was like, if you want to see him, get your butt over here. He was out in Florida, as one is, and when they're from New York originally. And so I fly out. Plane lands. I'm so excited, even just to see my grandpa one last time. I would choose a boring day of nothing with my grandpa over a week at Disneyland any day. I would always choose that. I mean, Grandpa Ben was the most fun person I'd ever known. Plane lands. I call my dad. I'm like, I'm here, and he said, "Yeah, Grandpa just died." So these things happen, and we can't just assume that it is there. I'm not suggesting that we get all morbid and stuff, but I do think regret inoculation is important, and to live more fully. With the awareness that,
Yep.
You know what, look at the people you love, because we know that love left on the table is one of our own biggest regrets as we're dying. So, Stevie Wonder says, I just call to say I love you. I do that with my friends all the time. It's old school. I call them literally on the phone, like, hey, my buddy Jed lives in Jersey. I hate the fact that he lives in Jersey. It's his only problem. I saw him for the first time in 9 years. And I realized at this rate, I will see him like 5 or 6 more times in my life if I'm lucky. So I
Right.
call him, try to make Zoom. People say, oh my God, I do Zoom all week. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're talking to a friend, perhaps with a beer or a coffee or whatever, just talking to a friend, it's not the same Zoom as it is when you're on one of these calls.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to transition to talking about friends because, oh my gosh, we haven't had an episode in a long time that I don't know if have we ever done a 2-part episode? Maybe we have. This has already been such a rich conversation. And what's one thing you're going to take away from this first half of this conversation, Sami?
I think, it's really hard not to just sit on and camp on those compliments that he gave me, particularly about skydiving and the courage it takes. I think about my Millennium Force story, and that when I was a kid, you have family near Cedar Point, Sandusky, Ohio. And I remember going there and being like, I'm going to ride Millennium Force. And right before the roller coaster took off, I freaked out and said, get me off this ride. And I sort of had this idea that, well, we have family here. We're going to be back here over and over again. It's no big deal. And my dad finished the ride and he says that was the best roller coaster he'd ever been on in his entire life. 5 years later, we did not make it back as fast as I thought I was. And I just remember being like, I have to take advantage of this moment. I've got to go get on Millennium Force and we're going to go ride it. And it's going to be amazing. I think about that when I think about the skydiving story and other things in our life is that, if I hadn't jumped out of the airplane, part of the reason that it didn't matter how afraid I was that I jumped out of that airplane is because I didn't want another Millennium Force moment. I didn't want another moment where fear kept me on the bench. And so I think that's what I keep with me. And I just would encourage you listening to think about what is your regret that you have that you don't want to have again, or what regret do you want to prevent?
Yeah, his whole concept of regret inoculation is like, what? It's like all of those words you just said, and you can just get it. Because people like get weirded out when I'm like, in here I talk about the future self. I'm giving my future self a gift. And they're like, what does that mean? Future self seems weird. But an inoculation, or maybe in more current terms, it would be a vaccine. For regret, I just love that idea, and I'm just gonna hold on to that thought.
I love that. This is so good. I would encourage anybody listening, go pick up the book, Super Psyched. You're gonna get a lot of good nuggets. He's got actual exercises for you to go through to connect and to be like, here's your connection activity for today for this particular area. So if you're looking for some encouragement to be intentional with how you approach connection, which I think really will make a whole difference in your freaking awesome life, a great book to go pick up. If you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, please feel free to go do that. You can go to our website, the letter B, freakingawesome.com, and subscribe, or send us a text message in the show notes and let us know you want to subscribe. Whatever it is, however you want to reach out and tell us, join our email news list. It's going to be really wonderful. We're so grateful for each and every one of you who are here, who listen to us and support us, and we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.